In this video, we'll explore Launchpad Pro's powerful 4-track sequencer and its many creative functions to help you generate interesting musical ideas. Whether you're using software or hardware equipment, Launchpad Pro makes it easy to sequence your tracks. By the end of this video, you'll be able to confidently use Launchpad Pro's 4-track sequencer to create unique and interesting musical sequences with both software and hardware equipment. Welcome back. To sequence your software synths, connect Launchpad Pro to your computer via USB and ensure that your software is set to the same MIDI channel as the sequencer track you wish to control. We'll cover the sequencer settings later in this video, where you'll learn how to change the Launchpad Pro sequencer track MIDI channels. For hardware sequencing, use the included TRS MIDI jack to MIDI DIN adapter and a MIDI cable to connect to your gear. Launchpad Pro sequencer can also be used entirely without a computer. Simply power the device using the included wall plug and the USB-C cable. There are two views we need to become familiar with before we continue. These include the steps view and the patterns view. In order to access any of these views, you'll first need to click on the sequencer pad. To access the steps view, simply click on the steps pad on the right-hand side of the Launchpad. The top half of the grid represents the 32 steps of a pattern. To see the white playhead progress through the steps of the pattern, press the play button. The playhead will move through the steps and back around to the beginning. Press play once again to stop playback. You'll notice the white playhead has stopped. The bottom half of the grid represents the play area, where you can play notes when pressed. Use the play area to experiment with different sounds and create unique patterns. Don't be afraid to try different combinations. This is where the magic happens. By mastering the steps view, you'll be able to create complex and engaging patterns and add depth and interest to your music. Whether you're using chromatic, scale, or drum tracks, it's easy to shift notes up and down to create unique sounds and patterns. For chromatic or scale track types, use the up and down buttons to shift notes up or down by an octave. This is a great way to create harmonies or add depth to your melodies. For drum tracks, you can shift notes up or down by 16 notes, which is a full 4x4 grid, using the up and down buttons. Additionally, use the left and right buttons to offset drum tracks by a single row, 4 notes at a time. This is useful for creating complex rhythms and beats. Experiment with different combinations of notes, adjustments, and to create unique sounds and patterns. With a little practice, you'll be able to create complex and engaging music that stands out from the crowd. In the play area, notes can be allocated to specific steps by maintaining the note and pressing the corresponding step. A maximum of 8 notes can be designated to each step. As a step is held, the associated notes will be displayed in red within the play area. Moreover, the steps will be previewed when activated. An alternative method is to hold the step first and then select the notes within the play area to assign them to the step. To determine which steps a note is assigned to, hold the note in the play area, and shortly after, the associated steps will be highlighted in red. In instances where multiple notes such as a chord are held, all steps containing the held notes will turn red. The Launchpad Pro features 4 distinct sequencer tracks. To switch between these tracks, simply press the eliminated track selection buttons. Each track is assigned a unique color, which is consistently displayed on both the track selection buttons and the play area. All 4 tracks have the capability to play concurrently. As I've mentioned in past videos, once you have recorded tracks in Launchpad, you can transfer those tracks to Ableton Live. Be mindful of the specific MIDI channels you intend to transmit each track to within Ableton Live. By default, MIDI tracks in Live are designed to accept input from any channel. Consequently, when there are patterns being played on multiple sequencer tracks, the notes will be played on all record-armed Ableton Live tracks by default. There are various methods to configure the sequencer tracks for playback with Live. Here is an example. Designate the tracks you want to utilize in Live to receive MIDI from Launchpad Pro, Mk3 LPP Pro, Mk3 MIDI if using a Mac. For Windows users, set MIDI from the LP Pro Mk3 MIDI 1. Then assign each track to receive MIDI on distinct channels that align with your Launchpad Pro sequencer tracks. By default, these are channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 for tracks 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. Make sure monitor is set to auto, then arm all 4 tracks by holding Command on Mac or Control on Windows as you click each record arm button. Alternatively, disable arm exclusive by right-clicking the record arm button. This allows you to arm multiple tracks without holding Command on a Mac or Control on a Windows machine. Let's move on to the patterns view. In the Launchpad Pro sequencer, each 32-step sequence is a pattern. Patterns allow you to build up a track consisting of multiple sections. Each track has access to 8 patterns per project. The awaiting pattern or series will emit a flashing signal signifying its queue status and will commence playing following the conclusion of the present pattern. In order to erase a pattern, maintain the clear button pressed and simultaneously tap on the designated pattern. To replicate a pattern, maintain the duplicate button pressed and select the desired pattern for duplication. While continuing to hold the duplicate button, choose an alternative pattern slot to insert the copied pattern. By keeping the duplicate button engaged, you can transfer the duplicated pattern to several locations. While the sequencer is playing, you can immediately transition between patterns. To instantly switch, hold Shift and choose the pattern or pattern chain. The sequencer will treat the new pattern as if it had been playing since the beginning of playback. Here's a helpful hint. If switching between patterns of varying lengths causes your track to fall out of sync, utilize an instant pattern switch to realign it with the correct timing. Next, let's talk about scenes. Scenes enable you to activate numerous patterns across all tracks with just one click and can be connected to establish a more extended song arrangement. Scenes can be identified by the 16 white pads situated at the lower part of the patterns view. To preview the patterns linked to a scene, hold the scene button momentarily. After a brief pause, the associated patterns or pattern chains will illuminate in red. To allocate a pattern to the scene, press the desired pattern or pattern chain while holding the scene button. This action won't impact the sequencer's ongoing playback. The newly assigned pattern chain will only be activated if you reselect the scene or if the scene chain cycles back to this particular scene. Alternatively, press and hold a pattern chain followed by pressing a scene to assign it. To confirm if the pattern chain has been effectively implemented, the scene's color will change from green to white if the active pattern chain don't correspond with what's saved in the current scene. By simultaneously pressing 2 scenes, you can link numerous scenes consecutively. This establishes the beginning and conclusion of your sequence. Upon pressing play, the scenes will be executed in succession. Progression to the subsequent scene occurs once all tracks have finished their pattern chain at least one time. Scenes can be lined up simultaneously to patterns. When the sequencer is in action, choosing a new scene or scene sequence will place it in the queue for playback. The waiting scenes will blink, and once the current pattern on track 1 finishes, the new scene or scene series will commence from the beginning without losing synchronization. As the sequencer operates, Press and hold Shift while picking a scene or scene chain for an immediate switch. The sequencer will then factor in the new scene sequence as though it had been active since the start of the playback. Here's a tip for you. In case cued scene transitions of varying durations have caused your track to be out of sync, employ an instant scene change to realign it. To reset a scene, press and hold clear and then select the desired scene to reset it. This action will restore the scene to its original condition, all tracks set to pattern 1. If you want to make a copy of a scene, you can do so by using the duplicate button. Press duplicate and select the scene you want to copy. While still holding down the duplicate button, choose another scene slot where you want to paste the copied scene. If you continue holding the duplicate button, you can paste the copied scene as many times as you want. It is important to note that all necessary steps must be followed to successfully duplicate a scene. Now let's talk about how we can customize patterns using pattern settings. Pattern settings gives the option to modify the way steps are executed in patterns. Upon selection of the pattern settings, the upper portion of the play area gets substituted with settings that influence the current pattern's playback. The pattern settings features allows users to modify the playback sequence of individual steps within patterns. While shift is held, the starting step can be adjusted similarly to the end step. Steps that have assigned notes but are outside the selected start and end points will appear in a dim red color, while unassigned steps will not have any color. Now let's talk about velocity. To adjust the speed of individual steps, click on the velocity button. The upper two rows of the play area act as sliders for the velocity of the selected step. You can select a step by tapping on a pad in the top half of the grid, which displays the velocity value on the slider. By tapping on the slider pad, you can alter the velocity of the notes on the step, ranging from 1, the lowest, to 16, the highest. If you manually adjust the velocity of a step containing multiple notes, all notes on the step will be set to the same velocity. During live recording, it is possible to record several notes with different velocity values in a single step. To represent this, the pads on the interface will be displayed with varying brightness levels. Bright pads will represent the lowest velocity, while dim pads will signify the range of velocities up to the highest value. Next up, let's talk about probability. Yes, the Launchpad Pro supports probability. The use of probability is effective in keeping drum sequences dynamic by introducing unpredictability and diversity. And it is a valuable tool for maintaining the evolution and movement of sequences. To adjust the likelihood that the notes will be played when a step is activated, you can use the probability function. The top row of the play area acts as a slider to control the probability value for the selected step. To choose a step, simply press one of the pads on the upper portion of the grid. The probability value will be displayed on the slider. You can adjust the probability by tapping on the slider with values ranging from 1, which is the minimum, to 8, which is the maximum. Each value corresponds to a specific probability percentage, with the minimum being 13% and the maximum being 100%. For steps that contain multiple notes, each note has an independent probability. As a result, there is a chance that one or both notes may play, or neither note may play at all, depending on their individual probabilities. It is not possible to assign different probability values to different notes on the same step. Each step can only have one probability value, which cannot be 100% for one note and 25% for another note. By default, all notes on a step have a probability value of 100%, meaning they will always play. Whenever steps, patterns, or projects are cleared, all probability values are reset to 100%. When you print a clip to Ableton Live, the probability for each relevant step is calculated only once. If you want repeatable variations of the pattern across multiple clips, you can print the pattern several times. The process of printing mutations will be discussed shortly. Next up, mutations. Adding an extra element of randomness to your sequences is possible with mutation. By applying mutation to a step, you can introduce a chance for the pitch of the notes to be altered when played back. To view and edit mutations of notes on a step, simply press the mutation button. This will turn the top row of the play area into a slider for the value of the currently selected step. To select a step, you can press a pad in the top half of the grid. The slider will display the mutation value for the step. There are 8 values for the mutation, with the minimum value, no mutation, on the far left and the maximum value on the far right. Whenever a step is assigned or recorded, it will always start with no mutation, 1 pad lit. When you print a clip to Ableton Live, each relevant step will be mutated a single time, resulting in a variation of the pattern. To get repeatable variations of the pattern across multiple clips, you can print the pattern several times. Again, we'll talk about print to clip shortly for creating evolving and generative patterns. You can use mutation and probability together. Once you've created a pattern, you can quickly nail down new ideas by printing them to Ableton Live. With microstep, you can achieve a higher resolution for note placement, which is particularly useful for creating strumming effects or quickly retriggering a single note. To edit the assignment of notes using microsteps, press the microsteps button. The top row of pads in the play area represent microsteps for the currently selected step, with 6 pads on the leftmost side. To select a step, simply press a pad in the top half of the grid. Once you have selected a step, you can hold a note in the play area and press a microstep to assign it directly. To deassign notes, hold a microstep and press the assign notes indicated in red in the play area. If you want to clear notes from microsteps, hold the clear button and press the microstep you wish to clear. To remove individual notes from a step, hold the step and press the assigned notes indicated in red in the play area. If you want to duplicate a microstep, hold the duplicate button and press a microstep to copy it. While still holding duplicate, press another microstep to paste the copied step there. However, it is important to note that duplication will not occur if the number of notes on the entire step exceeds the maximum of 8. Now, let's talk about tempo and swing. You can adjust the BPM, which is the beats per minute, and the swing of your tracks using tempo and swing views. To access the tempo or swing view, hold the shift key and press device or stop clip, respectively. The blue-white display in the tempo view shows the current BPM, while the orange-white display in the swing view shows the current swing value. When the swing value is above 50, it represents positive swing, where the offbeat notes will trigger late, while numbers below 50 represent negative swing, where offbeat notes will trigger early. You can change the tempo or swing by using the up and down arrow buttons on the left, which can be held to cycle through values quickly. With Launchpad Pro, you can transfer sequencer patterns to Ableton Live and place them in clip slots instantly without having to record them. This is possible by the print to clip function, which can be accessed through a dedicated button. To print a pattern from Launchpad Pro to Ableton Live, select a clip slot in Live by selecting it with your mouse and then press the Print to Clip button on Launchpad Pro. Alternatively, you can select a clip slot using Launchpad Pro by navigating to the session view, holding Shift and pressing a pad on the 8x8 grid. If the selected clip is empty, the printed pattern will be placed in that slot as a clip. If the slot is occupied, the pattern will be printed to the next empty clip slot below, enabling you to print the pattern multiple times without overriding any clips. The print to clip function is also available in Patterns view, where you can hold print to clip and press a track select button to transfer a pattern or a pattern chain to Ableton Live. It is worth noting that the print to clip button function will only be available when connected to Ableton Live. Next, let's talk about projects. A project on Launchpad Pro refers to a complete copy of the sequencer state, which includes patterns, scenes, scale, root, track types, and track channels. You can save up to 64 projects, which gives you the flexibility to build multiple tracks on the device. You can save a project on Launchpad Pro from any of the sequencer views, including Steps view, Project view, or Patterns view. To save a project, simply hold Shift and press Project in any of these views. This will cause the Save button to start pulsating green. To save the current project to the Active Project slot, press Projects again while in this state. The Save button will flash briefly to indicate that the device is saving, during which time all interaction is disabled. You can exit saving by pressing any button other than Shift, Projects, or Setup. If you're in the project view, you can also save the current project to another project slot. To do this, hold Shift and press Projects, which will make the Save button pulse white. You can then use the track select buttons to choose between 8 colors for the project to be saved as. Finally, press any project slots to save the current session to that slot. The Save button and the pad will both flash briefly to confirm that the project has been saved. It is worth noting that a saved project retains the note, chord mode settings, as well as custom mode master MIDI channels. Novation Components is an online editor and librarian that enables you to back up your projects online. It is compatible with all Novation products and can be accessed via a web MIDI compatible browser such as Google Chrome or Opera, or you can download a standalone version from the Novation customer portal. The sequencer settings allow you to modify several parameters such as the current scale and root note, the type of each track, drum, scale, chromatic, and the MIDI channel that each track sends on. You can access the sequencer settings by holding down the Shift key and pressing the sequencer button. You can choose between 3 available track types: drum, scale, and chromatic. By selecting one of the 3 pads located at the top right of the grid, you can then choose which track you want to modify by pressing the corresponding track select button. The top left 4x2 section of the page previews the track type and represents the left-hand side of the play area layout for each track type. The Root Select Scale viewer displays which notes are included in the currently selected scale on a piano layout keyboard. The blue pads represent the notes in the scale and the purple pads show the root. And then the dimly lit white pads represent notes outside of the scale. If you want to change the root note of the scale, simply press a pad in the scale viewer. The selected root note will remain in effect across note, chord, and sequencer modes. You can choose from a selection of 16 different scales using the Scale Select feature. To select the scale, simply press a pad. The selected scale will be illuminated in bright white while the unselected scales will be dim blue. The chosen scale will remain in effect across note, chord, and sequencer modes. The available scales are natural minor, natural major, Dorian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, melodic minor, harmonic minor, bebop Dorian, blues minor, pentatonic, Hungarian minor, Ukrainian Dorian, Marva, Tadi, whole tone, and Hirojoshi. You can choose the MIDI channel for each track ranging from 1 to 16. This is particularly handy when you want to transition notes to various instruments in Ableton Live or control separate hardware devices. In the next video in this series, we will be discussing the setup menu, LED settings, velocity settings, and much more. So if you don't want to miss any of the remaining videos in this series, make sure you Click that like button, share this content with all your friends, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so that you don't miss any of the future videos. Thanks, and see you next time.